Hi everyone, I'm Jayne at ReNW Worms. Welcome. What I'm going to be talking to you today about is managing your worm population, especially when it starts getting a little bit more than what you perhaps had bargained for. Because those worms will make those cocoons and those baby as fast as you can think of it. So sometimes the worm population gets a little bit more than what you want it to be. So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to manage that. All right, let's get into a bin where I'm going to do a fluff and feed so I can, get one of my bins moving along while I talk to you about your worm population. All right, so just as a little information, this is a Growout bin. I haven't been in here for 19 days. So they didn't even have any newspaper left. So they definitely need some attention here. So you can see just on the surface, look at how much castings are in here. Just castings, castings, castings. Let's see what kind of worms I've got, because like I said, this is a grow-out bin, so it can be anything from young worms up into, older teenagers, as I call them. This looks like a middle teenager bin. Okay, look at them. They're beautiful. Okay, so let's talk about how to manage your worm population. So say you go into your bin and it looks like this, right? You've got tons of worms and maybe you have, maybe you have several bins that look like this and you're like, you know what? I have enough worms. I don't really want to grow any more worms. So what am I going to do? Well, here are 7 ways to manage your worm bin population. The first one is easy. Sell them. Wouldn't that be great? What I'm going to do, by the way, is start moving these worms down to the end so I can set up a feed zone and, get them going. So sell your worms, right? Talk to, friends and families. Maybe they're interested. Maybe a garden group has people that are looking for ways to make their own worm castings, and you can, sell some of your worms there. The next way that you can manage your worm population is to simply give them away. Maybe you don't want to sell to your friends and family. Maybe you just want to give them some worms and get them addicted to this great hobby that is good for your garden, for your plants, for the planet. Give your worms away. The next way, number 3, I'm just putting in some bedding here. This is my basic bedding, which is pre-composted with cow manure mixed in. And this is much drier than I normally have it, but you can see this is very wet. So you know what I think I'm gonna do? I'm gonna mix this in and start absorbing some of this excess moisture into this more dry basic bedding, which I made dry on purpose. So, in case this was a situation, I could, start soaking up some of this excess moisture with my drier bedding. Okay, so donate. Number 3. There are a lot of organizations out there, community gardens that are always looking for donations, community parks, other organizations, and I can bet you that they would love to get a donation of some composting worms or just worms to add to their grow areas. And they would be happy to take worms off your hands. So think about donating. It's always good to give back to your community. Number 4 is you could take some of these worms and release them into the wild. Now, the wild doesn't necessarily mean that you drive 50 miles out into the middle of nowhere and dump a bucket of worms and, jump in your car and race away and hope nobody saw you. No, I'm talking about releasing them into the wild as in your garden, in your property, and just getting them out of your worm bins and let them, acclimate and live happily outside. Now, there are ways of doing this called garden worm towers. Sandra at ReNW Worms has several videos on how she does her garden worm towers. I'm sure there are other ones, but check her out and see how she does her worm towers. And that's a good way to kind of release them into the wild, but also, have them still working for you. All right. Now this is the moisture level is starting to come back very nicely here because it was really wet. Okay, so there is a word of caution I do want to give you regarding releasing your worms into the world at large. And that is, please be responsible doing that if you decide to look into this approach. And that means doing a little Googling and making sure that the specific species that you're looking to release is native to your area, or the area where you're going to place these worms. We don't want to be the ones introducing non-native invasive species into new areas. And you say, hey, they're worms, how bad can it be? Well, let me tell you, it can be bad. All right. You do, again, a little Googling and you'll find out very quickly how some invasive worm species have moved into areas and they're decimating the ground covers in forests. They're making habitats unlivable for the native species there. So just, again, be responsible, do a little research and make sure that you're not, screwing up the environment that we're trying to help out by doing worms and composting and things like that. All right. Number 5. Another way to control the worm population in your bins is to use their natural characteristics to maintain their numbers. Specifically, I'm talking about worms don't like to be overcrowded. So when they become too crowded in a bin, they slow down on their cocoon making. So what I'm doing right now, just FYI, is now that this material is not so wet, I'm going to put in a little feed zone and give them some of my vegetables that I just picked up the other day. Okay, a little bedding there, the ubiquitous napkin. I had company recently, as you may recall, so I've got a lot of napkins, so I can be generous with that. And now this is vegetables. I've actually Instapot cooked these. Whoa, my avocado almost dumped over. That would have been bad because it's all mushy. Hold on a second. There we go. Okay. I'm cooking my vegetables in my Instapot a little differently. I'm still exploring that. And when I get it down, I'll share that with you. Now I had a good amount of worms, so I can give them a generous amount. This is cabbage. And it's a, pretty fast food. So I'm going to give them a generous amount. Okay. So overpopulation, right? So if you want to slow down your worms, just don't split your bins. Keep your worms a little bit on the crowded side, and they'll figure out the number that matches their environment. All right. So that's a good way to have the worms, do the work for you and keep all your worms under your control, right? You're not giving them away. You're not selling them. You're not releasing them. You're keeping them in your worm bin, but you're, slowing down their population growth. That was avocado, which is my new best friend as far as food goes, because it's high in calories and good fats, and I want to, give my worms what they need in order to grow big and chunky. All right, let me take down my amendments here. I'm going to give them a little sprinkle of my worm chow, a little sprinkle of the old vegetable powder, both of which, by the way, are available for sale on my website, ReNWWorms.com. So if you're in the market for worms or cocoons or veggie powder or worm chow, come check out my website and let's see if I can meet your needs in the dirt. Okay, that is agricultural lime and azomite as well. Okay, so yeah, just let your worms decide how many belong in a bin, all right? And they'll do the work for you. So that's another way to control your population. The next way, number 6, you can control the population in your worm bin is, again, using a different self mechanism they have. And that is they don't make as many cocoons, they don't make as many babies when the conditions in your bin are not as ideal. And one of those conditions is moisture. So if you let your bin dry down toward the dry side, I'm not talking sand, but I'm talking more towards the dry end of the spectrum, your worms aren't quite as happy and they will slow down on their cocoon production. Again, waiting for ideal conditions to come along before they start making all those cocoons. So like this bedding here, which is, super moist, if I had breeders in here, which I don't, they're, like I said, they're teenagers, but if I had breeders in here, they would be going crazy making cocoons because they love it very, very moist, okay? So keep your bin a little bit on the dry side. Again, using the worm's own natural characteristics and preferences to manage your population. Now, the 7th and last, although I do have a bonus tip, trick, whatever, suggestion. The 7th one is to use false winter, okay? Again, your worms naturally want to, we're all set here. I'm gonna start closing this bin up. Let me put on a new sheets of newspaper. Again, your worms want to, make cocoons and get those little wisps out in the world when conditions are ideal. And that is usually during spring and summer when it's warm, there's lots of food, it's really conducive. So if you give them a false winter, which means keeping your bin at a cooler temperature, perhaps in a cellar or basement, in a cool corner of your garage. Maybe you have, an extra refrigerator that you're not using and you can set the temperature so it's around, 50 degrees or so. That lower temperature will slow the adult worms down from cocoon production. All right, so false winter. It's another thought. Okay, I'm going to put this back on my shelf, which, where is it? It's actually over here. I don't know if cameraman can follow me, but it's going to go on this shelf over here. Now, the last bonus one is you can take your extra worms, box them up, and ship them to me, and I'll take them off your hands. How about that one, huh? All right, I'm actually, by the way, just kidding on that one. I have enough worms for right now. But it kind of circles back to the first couple suggestions where you can, give away or donate your worms to somebody else who's going to be happy to have them. All right, so there's 7 suggestions for you to consider when you want to slow down the number of worms you have in your bin growth mechanism, all right? If you use other ways to slow down your worm population, let me know because I'm always interested in finding out new ways to do things. Or maybe you can comment that, hey, you're crazy, man. I want all the new worms I can get and I'm full steam ahead with making cocoons. That would be good to know as well, all right? So otherwise, I will see you on the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Really appreciate that. And I am yours in the dirt, Jayne.